All right, so who is excited to learn how to factor trinomials that now have the form ax squared plus bx plus c? So you're going to notice trinomials that look a lot like our last lesson, but you're going to have a number in front of the x squared, and there's a little bit more we have to think about and consider when we factor trinomials like this. All right, so we're going to just backtrack a second and remind ourselves how factoring trinomials gives us an answer of two binomials multiplied together. So here we have an example of two binomials multiplied together. So if we do multiply this out, we would FOIL, we would do our first term. That's an F. So 3x times x is 3x squared. Then we would do the outside terms. 3x times 3 is plus 9x. And then we would do our inside terms. 2 times x is plus 2x. And then we would do our last terms. 2 times 3 is plus 6. Now when you combine your like terms, 9x plus 2x, we get this over here. 3x squared plus 11x plus 6. So how do we start with 3x squared plus 11x plus 6 and end up with that those binomials that we just multiplied out? So some things we need to keep in mind in terms of placement here. Whatever goes in the first spot here and the first spot here, these will always multiply to give you that first term, 3x squared. That's taking care of your 3x times your x right here if we were to multiply out our answer. So 3x times x equals 3x squared. Whatever goes in the second spot will multiply to your c value. So 2 times 3 has to equal 6, and that comes from the last part of FOIL, the L. 2 times 3 gives us 6. So how do we get that 11x in the middle? And here's where it gets a little bit tricky is there is more than just 2 times 3 that multiplies to 6. We could have picked a 1 times a 6 instead of a 2 times 3. So how do we know that 2 times 3 is the right answer? So what we do is we do this little check. We're going to check our outside and inside terms. So we're going to check our outside terms right here. 3x times 3 is 9x. We're going to check our inside terms. 2 times x is 2x. And we're going to make sure that these 9x plus 2x will add up to the 11x, which we can see that it does. So this is our factored answer right there. We do call this method guessing and checking because what we do is we're going to guess what factors will go in each spot, and then we have to check our answer to make sure that we guessed correctly. So we guess and then we check it. All right, so we're just going to run through some examples of guessing and checking. There are some helpful hints I can share along the way. Just be aware that it may take more than one guess to get the right answer, but we're going to try to get good at guessing and checking so that we can get to the correct answer pretty quickly instead of having to guess a lot of options. Okay, so we have a trinomial, 9x squared plus 9x plus 2, and we're going to factor this. So when we factor trinomials, we are going to try to find what two binomials will multiply to give us 9x squared plus 9x plus 2. So here are the things we want to make sure that we're thinking about. Whatever goes in our first spot right here, this times this has to equal the 9x squared. So let's think about what those options might be. What multiplies to give us a 9x squared? It could be a 1x times a 9x. That's a factor pair of 9x squared. Or it could be a 3x times a 3x. We're going to consider trying both of those. Let's go ahead and try the x and the 9x. So we have an x here and a 9x here. Right now, we're taking care of the f of FOIL, the first part. We know that our x times our 9x is going to equal 9x squared. All right, what goes in the second spot has to multiply to give us the 2. Well, here's one thing that you can start to recognize and get excited about. When you have prime numbers for your A or your C value, it limits our options of factors because 2 only has 2 factors, 1 and 2. So we're going to go ahead and put a 1 here and a 2 here. So this is our guess, and we're going to check our answer. When we put, remember the 1 and the 2 that goes there multiplies to that 2. So in terms of foiling, that takes care of the last terms. So we know that if we were to multiply out the first terms and the last terms, we're getting the 9x squared and the 2. But the outside and the inside terms, that's what we have to check to see if we can get to this 9x right here. So let's check our outside and inside terms. So we multiply our outside, x times 2 is 2x, and 1 times 9x is 9x. We're checking to see, is 2x plus 9x equal to 9x? If we can see that it's not. So our first guess did not work. So what we're going to do is we're just going to cross it off and try again below. This is the work that you guys will show. You're going to show that you tried it. If it didn't work, you're going to show that you tried it again right below. So let's try again. So some things that you can think about doing, we had the x here and the 9x here. What if we switch the 1 and the 2? So if we put a 2 and a 1, that will give us a different outside and inside term. So let's see what happens there. So we already know that we're getting our 9x squared right here because we had x times 9x is 9x squared. We already know that the 2 times the 1 gives us the 2. So we have to do the outside and inside terms to see if we can come up with that 9x. So outside and inside terms, we check our outside. X times 1 is x. 2 times 9x is 18x. Is x plus 18x equal to 9x? No, it's not, so we cross it off and we try again. So this is our guessing and checking. When you guys first do guessing and checking, it might take several guesses like this, and once you kind of get the hang of it and you can think maybe a step ahead in the problem, this does get faster. So we just tried our x and 9x with both options of the 1 and the 2, switching, had the 1 first and the 2 and then switch. So we're done with that factor pair. So let's try the 3x's. Let's try 3x and 3x and then our factor pair of 1 and 2. We're going to check our outside and inside terms. Outside, 3x times 2 is 6x. 1 times 3x is 3x. And now we want to see, is 6x plus 3x equal to that 9x in the middle? And it is. We found it. We just got the correct factor. So the one thing though that I haven't written in here, I just noticed, is I don't have any signs. So the 6x and the 3x, should those be positive or negative? Well, we want those to be positive to add up to the 9x. So we are going to put plus signs in here. A positive 1 and a positive 2 will give us that positive 6x and 3x. So this is our answer. And this is the work that goes with your answer. That 6x and 3x shows me that you did check your answer. Okay, let's try another one. So the first thing I notice about our next example is that your A value and your C value are prime numbers. And remember, that's very exciting when we have prime numbers because there are less options for us to check when we make our guesses. So what are our factors of this 2x squared? It could be just a 1x times a 2x. 2 doesn't have any other factors. And then factors of 5 are 1 and 5. So we just have to find the right combination of putting these together. So let's say we put the x here and the 2x here. That's going to multiply and give us 2x squared. Now we're going to put the 1 and the 5 in our other two spots, and we have to try to add up to get to 7x. So here's where thinking ahead a little bit can help out. We know that these two terms will get multiplied together. So if I put the 5 right here, don't write this down, just listen to what I'm saying. If I put the 5 there, that's going to get me to 10x. And because everything's positive, this 10x plus whatever we get for our outside terms is going to be too big. that's not getting us to 7x. So I don't want to put the 5 right there. So hopefully my little eraser will work. Oh, perfect. So just having that forethought helps me know to try to put the 5 right there and the 1 right there. So again, I thought about it for a second, seeing that I'm trying to get to a 7x, and I can kind of make some choices that way. Because everything's positive, I know we're going to have positives, so let's check our outside and inside terms. Our outside, x times 5 is 5x, and our inside, 1 times 2 is 2x, is 5x plus 2x equal to our middle term of 7x, and it is. So we got that one on the first try. Again, it helps when you have prime numbers, so be thankful when you see that. All right, here's our last slide. If you notice that these two trinomials both have negative a values. So if you have a negative leading term, we don't want that to be negative. So we are going to go ahead and factor out a -1 from every term. We want our ax squared to be a positive value. So we're going to factor a -1 out. If you divide all of those by -1, it basically goes in and changes your signs. So you're going to have a 2x squared minus a 7x minus a 4. Now this is what we're going to factor, is this trinomial. I'm going to go ahead and circle the -1 because in the end that's going to come down and be part of our final answer. But we'll get to that when we get to the end of the problem. Okay, so now we're going to factor our trinomial. Again, let's look at our a and c values. So we need factors of 2x squared. 2 is prime, so that's exciting. So that could be x and 2x. Nothing else will multiply to that. Now, if your c value is 4, so we have 1 and 4 and 2 and 2. We do want to pay attention to the fact that that's a -4, so we're going to be bringing in negatives on this one. But we do have 2 possible factor pairs over here that could get us to that 4. So now we're just going to go ahead and guess and check. So our first guess, we know that this is going to be the x and the 2x. When it's prime, that's not going to be anything else. So again, some things to think about. Our goal is to get to a 7x. And so we can choose to use factors that would multiply with a 1 and a 4, or factors that would multiply with a 2 and a 2. So that makes me think maybe I want to multiply with the 4 because that's a bigger number. So this is the way we reason through it, and this is how we get better at guessing and checking. So I'm going to try the 1 and the 4 first. It might not work, but if it does, then I'm saving myself a little bit of time. Now remember, what we want to think about is, what's going to multiply with the 2x and what's going to multiply with the 1x. We're trying to get to a 7. Keep in mind we are working with negatives here, so that makes me want to try, I'm going to try the 4 here and the 1 here. The reason why I tried the 4 there is because 4 times 2x gets me to 8x. Okay, and x times 1 gets me to x. Now, in order to get a -4 right here, we need one negative number in our factor pair. So it's either going to be a -1 or a -4. So if you look at our 4 and our 1, and you check your outside and your inside terms, one of these will be negative, and which one should be negative to add to get a -7x. If we make the x negative up here, if that's a -x, -x plus 8x is a +7x. So I can see that I'm getting close, but we just need it to be a -7x. So that tells me, why don't we make the 8 negative? So is 1x plus a -8x equal to -7x? It is. So now let's just finish up our answer with the signs. In order to get that -8x, that came from your 2x times this 4. So should the 4 be positive or negative to get a -8x? And we want that to be a -4. And if the 4 is negative, that means the 1 is positive. That's how we're going to get that -4 right there. And we already did our check, so we know it's going to work out. So we're going to circle it, and there's our right answer. We didn't even have to guess more than once. Okay, last one here. what we want to notice is that your a value is negative, your leading term. This needs to be positive, so we are going to fix that by factoring out that -1 to start. Oh my gosh, did you guys catch my mistake? And I even circled it. Look right here. I circled the -1 and I drew an arrow down here hoping that it would catch my eye, and it didn't. So that -1, remember, is part of our answer, so it does go out front. So -1 times, in parentheses, x minus 4, and then parentheses 2x plus 1, that is our factored answer. All right, so let's factor out a -1 like we did on the last one. So -1, whoa, it's an ugly -1. So -1, and that leaves us with a positive 3x squared, a negative 19x, and a positive 20. Okay, so now we're going to work on finding the binomials that will multiply to give us that trinomial. So whatever goes in the first spot has to multiply to 3x squared, and that's prime, so we're excited. That's going to be an x and a 3x. It can't be anything else. Now what's going to multiply to give us a positive 20? Well, we have some options. 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 4 and 5. It could be any of those, okay? Now the thing we do want to keep in mind is that it has to multiply to a positive 20, right? So that means all your signs are positive over here, or they could all be negative. A -1 times a -20 is a positive 20. How do we know if we're going to want positive or negative signs? They have to add up to this negative number over here. So we do want to just keep in mind that we're going to have negative factors on this one. It's easy for us to make that distinction right away. Okay, so let's go ahead and put our x and our 3x in there. Sometimes it takes me a second to switch marker colors if sometimes you're wondering what I'm doing. So x and 3x. And again, what I do is I do kind of just look at this. I know that 3 is going to get multiplied by something right there, and x is going to get multiplied by something right there. So our goal is to get to that -19. If I consider the 1 and the 20, let's say we put a 20 right here. And again, I think through these before I check every possibility. If I multiply that, that gets me to a 60x. That's nowhere near a -19. So I maybe don't want to consider a 20 right there. If we consider putting a 20 over here, that gets us to a 20x for our outside terms. So it could maybe be that, because we're trying to get to a -19. So if the 20 goes there and the 1 goes there, and we did say they would be negative, gives us a -20x and a -3x. Do those add up to -19? And again, do these add up to -19? They don't. So what are we going to do? We're going to cross this off and just show I guessed one and it didn't work. I'm going to continue my work below and show my next thing I'm going to try. So I did kind of think through on the last one. Remember how I said, what if the 20 was here first? But I knew that wasn't going to work out, so then I just automatically put the 20 in the second spot. So I know I don't need to switch these as another possibility. But, you know, if you check one, it doesn't work, we do usually switch those around to see if that fixes it. But I kind of had thought through that and knew that wasn't going to be the case. All right, so here's x and 3x. Again, I'm thinking through ahead what could possibly go there. So I'm trying to get to a -19. And I try to think, what could 3 be multiplied by? This is kind of the one that's catching my eye right here, is the -4 and -5. What if we put a -5 right here? That gets me to a -15x. That's kind of getting me in the ballpark. So if the -5 goes there, the -4 would go there. And then x times -4 is -4x. And then we check, is -4x plus -15x equal to that -19x? And it is. It worked out. So I'm not going to forget this time our -1 that comes down, so that is going to go out in front. Here's our answer. My check is part of the answer because that's you communicating to me, oh, yep, I see. I know that I checked my answer and I know that that's correct.